We're real close tonight, guys. Closer than you think. Closer than you think. But back to Jewish culture. Sorry, I don't know how I bridged the gap between my asshole. Oh my God, I'm gonna get so many emails. It's such a bummer. We can edit this. But I recently went to a midnight Catholic mass. First of all, midnight, way to go. Jewish people are like, it's sundown, you better stay inside. Be careful. Went to this midnight mass, walked into the church, which first of all to me was like a miracle. I thought that like a doily that was also a spider web would come down and be like, not you. And I'd be like, I know, sorry. Please. Excuse me, sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. But like, you know, the synagogue that I went to when I was a kid looked like a Chinese restaurant from the 70s without windows, and it was like such a bummer. And I went into this place and it was like, I was like, holy shit, like churches are just beautiful little castles for God. Like, this is gorgeous. But everyone in there was like dressed in red and green, and like then the guys came out, the priests, and they had the incense, and they were like, yeah! Everyone's dressed up. And like they sing the songs, and like weirdly I knew some of the songs because they're like in our culture. But even when I didn't really know the words, I could still be like, boo, 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 and everyone was like, yeah, like just like the best mood. Like the Christians are in the best moods. And I just was like, oh man, this is so annoying. Like their God got killed as a hunk, and they're not even upset. And he's like, no, I don't want to stress you out. Don't worry about it. Like, my body's a cracker. No. Like, drink my blood. It's wine. Like, this is a party. Like, just like felt so shortchanged. And like the Christmas songs, I'm thinking about it. They're all just like, jingle, jingle, everybody gets a present. Like, Santa comes down, but he never catches on fire. We don't know how it happens. Like, everything's fine. We never worry, that's not in our culture, like... And like the Jewish songs, like the happy songs that you sing before you open your Barbie van or whatever you're lucky enough to get. I got the Barbie van. Like those songs are just like, they tried to kill us in the past. They're gonna do it again. Rest for just a moment. There's only one drop of oil for 1,000,000 people.
The Dutch names are wild. I mean, they're just crazy. When you learn a Dutch name, it's like you are actually speaking Dutch. It's insane. Like, Gijs's best friend is named Thijs. I'm like, what? Gijs and Thijs? I'm like, is this a ghetto morning show? What is this? Gijs used to have a cat named Goose. I was like, you better not. You better not. One time, the cat got out. Gijs called Thijs and was like, Goose is on the loose. I'm like, is this a Dutch Dr. Seuss? It's too much. Too much. I'm not making this up. My mother-in-law, beautiful lady, her name is Johanna. She legally shortened it, as you do in Holland, to Hanukkah. What now? I said, Hanukkah, like the holidays? She's like, it sounds nothing like the holidays. I was like, happy Kwanzaa, bitch. Like, I don't even know what to say. I feel like this is a joke on me.
My dad retired recently. That's very weird, because he's become a totally different person. He's like really softened. He's become very sentimental. He's like a total pussy, and like I don't know how to handle that energy at all. Like I was home for Thanksgiving a couple years ago, and we were watching football on TV. It's just me and him in the living room. And when the game ended, he turned the TV off and he looked at me and he went, Joseph, have I ever told you about my happiest memory? I was like, nah. And he goes, well, I want to share this with you. I don't know if you remember this, but when you were 9 years old, Joseph, your mother and I, we bought you a Sega Genesis for Hanukkah. Do you remember that? And you wanted that Sega so badly, you kept asking for it for months, and we told you were never getting a Sega. And that first night of Hanukkah, you opened up that gift, and I've never seen anything like it. You started jumping up and down and screaming. You kissed me on the cheek. And to know that I could bring another person that kind of joy, he was like getting all emotional. He's like, if I could freeze my life in any moment, it would be right there when you open that Sega. And I was sitting there like, damn, Dad, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was beautiful. But in my head, I was like, fuck. So little backstory. Here's what you need to know. When I was 9 years old, I was a little piece of shit, and I knew where my parents hid presents, right? And so one day, my parents went to the grocery store. I saw them pull out of the driveway, and I locked the door. I ran into my dad's closet, looked under this big pile of sweaters. There was a giant, wrapped, rectangular present. And like a little spy, I got down and carefully opened up the Scotch tape, and it revealed the word Sega Genesis. And obviously, out loud, I was like, fucking finally! God damn it. So I got back down, I started to close the present back up, and as I did, I tore the corner of the wrapping paper. It wasn't severe, but, maybe if you imagine that your dad worked closely with, like forensic scientists, it was like super noticeable. And for the next 6 weeks, I can't even convey to you the sheer terror I lived under, that at any point my dad was gonna get chilly, put on a sweater, see this tampered present, and then send me to jail? Like, the stakes were so high. And it was like a true Hanukkah miracle. Like, the first night, my parents put out all the presents for my sister and I. No one noticed the tear. We went over to the table. We started lighting candles, all that bullshit. And then, before anyone had a chance to look at the presents, I ran over, I tore it open, and just, like, wildly overcompensated, like a bad actor. I was like, what, a Sega? And I started like jumping up and down and screaming. I kissed my dad on the cheek. At one point, I did a cartwheel. That's how crazy. And in my head, I was like, I knew it was effeminate, but I was like, I gotta sell this. I gotta sell this. I guess I sold it. It's my dad's happiest memory. Are there any Jews here, by the way? Any Jews? Nice. Round them up! JK.